Hey there, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of The Divine Feminine Awakened. It feels great to be with you again. Especially after a little bit of a hiatus that I've had to take. As some of you may know, Hurricane Helene came through the Appalachian Mountains a couple weeks ago and left a little bit of chaos in her wake. While my town didn't sustain any direct damage, everywhere within 45 minutes of me have. So as you can imagine, that slowed things down a bit for me as really us and the whole town kind of switched into helping those around us. Life, much like the seasons, has its ebbs and its flows, and sometimes we need to take time for rest and renewal, I guess, and reflection. And Samhain, the festival that we're going to explore today, is the perfect reminder for these natural cycles. And while I can't share everything that's been happening just yet, I want you guys to know that I'm back, re-energized with my Samhain mug of deliciousness. I've had a smoky smoke to get my mind right, and I'm super excited to dive into the mysteries of Samhain with you all. This is a sacred time of year, a time where the veil between the worlds is thin, and we can honor both cycles of life and death. It's the perfect moment for us to reconnect. So let's take this journey together. So if you haven't already, go ahead and grab your mug of coffee or tea, whatever you like. If it's cold in your area, grab a mug. I've been lucky to have some fairly warm weather, which is not like this area. So today I'm not needing my comfy blanket, but let's get cozy and let's get into everything about Samhain. Now, Samhain is such a powerful time in the wheel of the year, and it's got deep roots in pagan and Celtic traditions. For our ancestors, Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, the darker half of the year. It was seen as a time of both celebration and deep reverence. This was a moment to acknowledge the cycles of life and death and to honor the ancestors that came before us. Now, you might have heard Samhain called the Witch's New Year, and in many ways it is. Just like we celebrate New Year's in January in the Western Hemisphere, Samhain is a time of reflection, letting go of the old and preparing for the new beginnings. But instead of the fireworks and the parties, this transition is marked more by introspective and sacred practices, like rituals, offerings, and just connecting to the other side as the veil between the worlds becomes thin. This time of year also asks us to embrace the natural cycles of death and rebirth. It's not just about literal death, but also symbolic death. The things that we need to release, to grow and evolve. As we move through life, we continually experience these smaller deaths. Think about it. We've got deaths of relationships, of habits, deaths of beliefs, things that make space for something new to be born. And Samhain invites us all to embrace these moments as opportunities of transformation. I remember the first time I truly connected with Samhain. It was about 2 years ago. I was going through, a period of intense change in my life. And it really felt like in the moment, everything that I had known was coming to an end. That year, I embraced Samhain as kind of a time to release those old habits and those beliefs. And it really helped me find peace in the process of letting go, which was something I had found very hard to do in the past. I mean, it's amazing how this season can provide such comfort knowing that in the darkness, those new beginnings are always waiting for us. What I find fascinating is that the many traditions that we associate with Halloween today, like carving the pumpkins, dressing up, and trick-or-treating, actually have their roots in ancient Samhain practices. People would carve faces into turnips to ward off spirits. Excuse me. They'd wear costumes to blend in with the outwardly beings. And they'd even offer food to the spirits in exchange for protection and blessings. Now, while Halloween has taken on a life of its own, at its core, it's still a reflection of the magic and mystery that surrounds Samhain. And there's something about this time of year that just feels different, isn't there? As the days grow shorter and the nights colder, like we're naturally drawn inward. It's like the earth itself is inviting us to slow down, reflect, and prepare for the quieter months ahead. For many of us, this energetic shift can feel a little heavy. You might feel more introspective, emotional, even nostalgic. And that's okay. Like Samhain reminds us that it's not only natural but necessary to rest, reflect, and release. This is also a beautiful time to connect with the divine feminine. Samhain reflects the feminine energies of cycles, the endless dance of life, death, and rebirth. It's a time to trust our intuition, to honor the wisdom of the dark, and to find strength in the quiet, internal spaces. It invites us to listen to the whispers of our ancestors and the wisdom that lives within each of us. So as we move through this sacred season, I'd love for you to take a moment and ask yourself, what is it that you need to release right now? What old patterns, beliefs, or habits are you ready to lay to rest? And what are you ready to make space for as you move into the new? These are the kinds of questions that Samhain invites us to sit with, and they can be powerful tools for growth and transformation. We talked about Samhain as a time of honoring the cycles of life and death, but let's dive deeper into what it truly means on a personal level. Death and rebirth aren't just external events. They're internal processes like we all go through, sometimes without even realizing it. Every day we're shedding parts of ourselves. Old habits, outdated beliefs, identities we've outgrown. It might not be as dramatic as the physical death of a loved one, but these little deaths can still feel significant. They can be hard to navigate because they often challenge our sense of security and comfort. And Samhain invites us to look at these moments with fresh eyes. Instead of fearing the endings, we're asked to honor them as vital steps in our spiritual journey. Like, what if we could see the death of a chapter in our lives not as something to mourn, but as something to celebrate? What if we could learn to trust that by releasing what no longer serves us, we're creating space for something new to emerge? In my own experience, I mean, there have been moments where letting go, gosh, it felt impossible. There was so much attachment to old goals, old things that I thought I was supposed to be doing, and even parts of my identity, like who I was or who I thought I was at the time. But when I finally allowed myself to begin to release those things, I actually found that what came next was far more aligned to who I truly am. It's as if by clinging to the old, I was blocking something new from arriving. Holding on to all these fears. It was keeping me stagnant. And this is the deeper lesson of Samhain, the power of surrender. Death isn't something to resist. It's that necessary part of growth, whether we're talking about the physical body or a spiritual evolution. When we resist, we stay stuck in patterns that no longer serve us. And when we embrace the death of what needs to fall away, we allow rebirth to happen naturally. And this doesn't have to be a dramatic process. It can be as simple as letting go of old beliefs that limit us, or gently releasing emotional baggage that we've carried for too long. Maybe we need to have that good cry over something that happened in the past that we just can't let go of, or forgive someone or something from our past that may have wronged us or something to that nature, and we haven't been able to forgive and let go. The beauty of Samhain is that it offers us an opportunity to consciously engage with the process, to choose what we're ready to let go of, and to trust that whatever comes next is exactly what we need. So, as you're listening, I invite you to ask yourself, what is it that I'm holding on to that's no longer serving me? What part of me needs to die for something new to be born? And these can be challenging questions, but sitting with them can bring incredible clarity. Remember, just as the earth needs its time to rest in the winter, we too need those moments of rest and release. And it's through this surrender that we really create that space for transformation. Now, as we explored the symbolism of death and rebirth of Samhain, it's important to recognize that this process of release and renewal, it's not always easy. I mean, death, even in a symbolic sense, often brings up resistance. Even when we know something that we're dealing with has reached its end, there's that part of us that clings to it. And it's natural. It really is. Resistance shows up in so many ways in our life. It can look like procrastination, denial, or even that feeling that I think we're most familiar with is feeling stuck. Like there's no other option for us. And we might avoid confronting certain truths just because we're afraid of what letting go is going to mean. Maybe we're worried about losing our sense of identity, or maybe we fear the unknown. But this resistance, while it's understandable, can keep us from experiencing the transformation that's waiting on the other side. In my own life, I've noticed the things I resist letting go of the most are often the things that I need to release the most. It's like that part of me that knows that in order to grow, I have to let things die, but my ego wants to hold on for dear life. And this is where the wisdom of Samhain comes in. This sacred time reminds us that death is not something to fear. It's a doorway to new beginnings. Think about it this way. When a tree sheds its leaves, it doesn't resist the process. It knows that the old leaves have served their purpose, and by letting them go, it's preparing for the new growth that comes in the spring. We, too, need to trust that by letting go, we're creating space for our own renewal. But I get it. I mean, letting go can feel very, very, very uncomfortable. Sometimes we're so attached to our stories, our old patterns, that we convince ourselves that we need them to survive. This is especially true when it comes to the beliefs about ourselves, that we've carried around for a long time. That inner voice that maybe is not so nice to you. Maybe you've always thought of yourself in a certain way. And the idea of releasing that identity feels like stepping into the unknown. But Samhain invites us to embrace the unknown, trusting that whatever comes next is absolutely in alignment with our highest good. One thing that's helped me in navigating this resistance is, as hard as it is, acknowledging it instead of pushing it away. And pushing it away has been my go-to my entire life. Stuff it away somewhere and it can't hurt me. Put my walls up and it can't hurt me. But now I'll ask myself, what am I afraid of losing if I let go of this? Really getting into those uncomfortable questions. What's the deeper fear that's keeping me from embracing this change? And that's the big thing. It's always fear with me that holds me back. So that often is a hard question to sit with, for sure. But by sitting with these questions, I'm often able to move through that resistance, finding a sense of peace in the process of the surrender. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I have to go over those questions a few times. So I guess as you reflect through this conversation, reflect on what needs to die in your own life. Notice where that resistance shows up. Is there something you've been holding on to out of fear or uncertainty? And can you give yourself the permission to release it, knowing that, just like nature, you're always in a state of renewal? When we release the old, we make space for new growth, for rebirth. This is the gift of Samhain. The opportunity to consciously engage in this cycle of life and death and rebirth. And to trust that through the process, we're always evolving into a more authentic version of ourselves. One of the most beautiful aspects of Samhain is its emphasis on honoring our ancestors. This time of year, the veil between the worlds is said to be thin, making it easier to connect with the spirits of those who passed on. Like for many of us, this can be a time to reflect on the legacy of our ancestors, the lessons they've passed down, and the ways in which their presence continues to influence our lives today. I know especially here in the Appalachian Mountains, like our roots are deep in these mountains, and all of us or most of us grow up with certain meals that we cook, traditions that we have carried on through generations. But what does it mean to honor our ancestors? And it doesn't have to be like this complicated or formal process. It can be as simple as lighting a candle, saying a prayer, or offering gratitude for the guidance and the wisdom they've provided. Whether we're connecting with ancestors we knew personally or those from generations far back, Samhain offers us the opportunity to bridge that gap between the seen and the unseen. Now, during this time, you might even notice an increase in unexplained activity around you. Whether it's sensing a presence, how many times have you been sitting there and thought you felt somebody walk behind you, or you felt somebody in the other room only to walk in there and find nobody was there? Maybe you hear whispers or even smelling the familiar scent of a loved one who's passed on. These are all the signs that the veil is thin and our ancestors are closer than ever. And I've had some pretty interesting experiences around this time myself in this house. And I will say that I used to be a huge skeptic when I was younger, which is so funny. And I would always say, I don't believe things unless I experience them myself. Well, the universe definitely had a way of showing me that, there are other realms. So I'll share this story with you. And like I said, it's happened in this house. Most of the activity that I've experienced in my life has actually been in this house, which is pretty interesting. But I remember one night I was woken up to the sound of, my husband coming back into the room. I think he went to the bathroom or got something to drink or something. And just as he walked in, I heard a woman whisper as clear as day, "Hey." I mean, it was so clear that my husband responded to the voice thinking it was me. And then, there's been other moments where we've found clothing or items around the house that don't belong to anybody living here. So those have been comical conversations to sit here and, everybody asks, "Hey, is this yours? Is this yours? Is this yours?" And nobody knows where it's come from. But these subtle but powerful signs remind me that the presence of our ancestors is always with us, especially during this sacred time. For me, this practice of honoring my ancestors often starts with quiet reflection. I'll set aside time during this season to sit with the memories and the energies of my ancestors. And sometimes that looks like, going through old photos, or it might be something more intuitive, just feeling their presence around me. There's something incredibly grounding about acknowledging where we come from and recognizing that the strength, resilience, and wisdom of our ancestors live on in us. I mean, think about all the things that have happened through history. Our ancestors went through that stuff, so there's definitely strength and resilience there. And I think it's important to remember that when we talk about ancestors, we're not just talking about blood relatives. An ancestor can be anyone who's had profound impact on your life, or the world in which you live. This could be a mentor, a teacher, or even a historical figure whose work has shaped your path. Honoring these individuals can be just as powerful as their legacy continues to influence in subtle ways today. As we honor our ancestors, we also create space for healing, which I don't think most people think about. Sometimes there's unresolved wounds or patterns that have been passed down through generations. And by acknowledging and honoring our ancestors, we can begin to heal those wounds, both for ourselves and for those who came before us. This is especially true if there's been pain or trauma in our family line. And Samhain invites us not only to honor the light, but also to acknowledge the shadows, those unspoken stories that may still linger in the background of our lives. One of the ways that I like to engage with this energy is through creating an ancestral space or altar. And I use the term altar loosely because I don't personally worship a deity of any kind. I mean, each person's practice is different and very sacred and personal. It can be as simple as a space with photos, mementos, or objects that remind me of those who've come before me. I might leave offerings like flowers. Any food offerings that I typically do are done outside, just because, well, bugs and critters. I'm okay with ghosts being in my house, but I don't want to invite those little things in my house. So I do this as a way of showing gratitude. This small act of resemblance really helps me feel like connected to something larger than myself, to the lineage of souls that have paved the way for my journey. And in many cultures, this practice of honoring the dead is a central part of community life. We see it in traditions like Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, where families come together and celebrate and remember those who've passed on. And Samhain carries a similar energy. It's a reminder that death is not the end, but a transition, and that our connection to our ancestors is ongoing. So as you move through the season, I invite you to take a moment to honor those that have walked this earth before you. What wisdom or lessons have they passed down? And how do you feel their presence in your life? And if there are wounds in your ancestral line, can you offer compassion and healing for those stories? This practice not only honors the past, but it also strengthens the foundation from which we move forward in the future. The path that we create for our kids and what comes after us. So now let's dive a little deeper into the rituals and celebrations that accompany Samhain. This time of year is rich with traditions, and not only do they honor our ancestors, but they also help us, to connect with the cycles of life and death. Engaging in these rituals can be a powerful way to ground ourselves and to find meaning during this sacred season. And I think that's why this is one of my favorite times of year. So one central practice that we've already touched on is creating that sacred space or that altar dedicated to the honoring the departed. And this space is going to serve as a focal point of any rituals or ceremonies and it's a tangible connection to the spiritual world. So you want to choose a peaceful area in your home, maybe outdoors, where your rituals or those ceremonies can be conducted without any interruption at all. And you might want to incorporate some seasonal elements into it. Maybe pumpkins, gourds. If you've got beautiful maple and oak trees in your yard, maybe you want to grab, some of those autumn leaves that have changed colors and are falling to the ground. All of that will help ground your altar into the energy of the season. And I have to say that setting up this space, it's not about decoration. While it looks beautiful, don't get me wrong, it's not about the decoration or the aesthetic that seems to be really, really popular right now. This is a very spiritual, meditative act, at least for me, I can say, that really allows us to reflect on our connections with those who've passed, and at the same time inviting their wisdom into our lives. And most of us already have this available in our space as part of the 4 elements, but if you don't, you can also place candles on the altar or in your space. And this light represents the light of your ancestors. And as you light these candles, take a moment to express gratitude for the guidance they provided and the love they continue to share. Another meaningful ritual is shadow work, engaging in shadow work. This is a great time to reflect on the parts of ourselves that we may have hidden or, neglected. Maybe there's a part of us that we've stuffed away and haven't really nurtured or paid any attention to. Samhain, as that time of introspection, invites us to look within, to confront our fears and embrace the aspects of our lives that may need healing or at least acknowledgement. You could spend some time journaling, which is kind of my go-to. So you journal your thoughts and feelings. And to kind of help your thoughts get going, if kind of you struggle to get into that mind frame, is considering asking your questions like, what aspects of my life do I feel ready to release? What lessons from my ancestors can I integrate into my life? Creating a safe and quiet environment for this reflection can also enhance your experience and foster deeper insight. So I encourage that you do it when you're alone, when you can really make it a sacred and spiritual time. For those of you that may be religious, think of this time as being as sacred as going to church. That time that you allot to go and do your worship or your honoring. Now, earlier I mentioned food as an offering, as a way to honor our ancestors, but let's not forget about the importance of feasting during this time of the wheel of the year. Many cultures celebrate Samhain with a harvest feast. You gather your family, your friends to share food and stories. I think we all do this, right? We all have our get-togethers. And if you don't, I encourage you to start doing it. It's good for the soul. But this act of coming together, not only honors our ancestors, but it also strengthens those bonds with those we share that are still living. And I also love that this practice can be shared across those different belief systems. If you're like me, you probably have family and friends that follow a different path than you do. So this is a way to come together and honor the past together, despite the differences in your spiritual beliefs. Consider preparing a meal that includes seasonal ingredients, maybe things from your garden or foraging adventures, such as root vegetables, apples. I know in my area, there's apple trees everywhere. So if you don't have an apple tree on your property, you're probably going to find it somewhere in the middle of the field. Grains. Maybe you like to grow your own grains. And make these meals with those ingredients and have these feasts while you're sharing stories about your loved ones. Reminisce about times past, and share those memories with everybody. Share stories that maybe your friends have never heard, and vice versa. This, it creates a sense of connection across the generations, and I think that's what I love. There's nothing like sitting down with our grandfathers and grandmothers and hearing stories of times past and stories that have been passed down through the generations. I mean, there's just nothing like it. And you might even want to prepare a special dish that has been passed down in your family. Something that is just a family favorite. I know for me, a special place in my heart is my grandma's pecan pie. I absolutely love it and have fond memories growing up as a kid, watching her make these pies from scratch and just the enjoyment out of it. And she didn't stop at pecan pies. She made almost everything. And those meals that you grew up on and that you love, consider making those, especially if those meals come from loved ones that have passed on. Create a warm, communal atmosphere that's filled with love and remembrance. Make it a joyful time. Going back to the other rituals, we talked about feasting. We talked about creating a sacred space. Now let's talk a little bit about divination. So maybe you want to practice divination during Samhain. Many people, including myself, believe that this is a powerful time for seeking guidance from the universe and connecting with the energies of the ancestors. Now, while I use divination a little more for a deep internal conversation with your subconscious more than the universe, there are many that use it as a tool of speaking with the universe and things like that. I mean, you could try tarot reading, oracle cards. You could try scrying with a mirror, with water or crystals, or even as simple as those journaling prompts to just gain that insight into your life path. Whatever works for you in your journey in life. What I share as part of my practice and what I suggest is not the end all be all. That's what I love so much about this practice, and following the wheel of the year is very, very personal and very sacred, and you can definitely make it your own. But like I said, trying those different things like the tarot and stuff, and I'll say if you're new to divination, you might want to, and I'll say tarot cards are the way that you want to go. You might want to start with just a simple spread, 1 card spread, or even a 3-card spread that represents the past, present, and future, because this can help you reflect on your journey and the guidance that's available to you. The energy of Samhain can amplify your intuition, and that's why people love to do divination at this time of year, again, because that the veil between worlds is thin. And so by doing divination and using the energy of Samhain, you're amplifying your tuition, so you're hearing those messages with more clarity, and it's really helping you to tap into those deeper truths and insights from your subconscious. It's coming from those signals that your body and your mind and your soul is picking up on that your conscious brain doesn't always pick up on. These are the things that your ancestors may reveal to you. And if you're feeling bold, then you could consider hosting a dumb supper. I know it's not what it sounds like, but that is what it's called. This is a little more challenging because you have to be comfortable in the silence. So if you're uncomfortable in the silence, this one may cause a little more work for you, but it could very well be very, very worth it in the end. You never know until you try. So if you're feeling bold, you can host this dumb supper, and what that is, it's a silent meal, and it's prepared in honor of the deceased. And it's really a beautiful way to honor those that have passed while creating, space for reflection and connection. It's definitely an interesting concept. So to prepare, you set the table as you normally would, but you leave one place setting empty. And before the meal, you take a moment to invite the spirits of your loved ones to join you. And during the supper, you enjoy your meal in silence, allowing the presence of your ancestors to fill the space. And if you're an introvert like me or love your quiet time, you may absolutely love this concept and do it all the time or make it a routine thing, which is phenomenal. But yeah, that's what a dumb supper is. And this practice, it can be so deeply moving, and it really can foster a sense of connection to your lineage. Ultimately, the rituals that we choose to engage in during Samhain should resonate with you in your personal beliefs and practices. You don't have to take what I've suggested or what I do and adopt them as your practice. This is completely individual and your own, as I said earlier. So whether it's that simple candle lighting, or maybe you do something more elaborate, a bigger ceremony, that intention behind our action is what truly matters. So if you've got the right intention during that simple candle lighting, or that prayer that you want to say, or even that elaborate ceremony, that is what matters in the practice of honoring our ancestors. This is the time for honoring the cycle of life, acknowledging our losses, and then also celebrating the connections that we share, both with the living and the departed. We all hold that connection to the people who have passed on. This is a perfect time of year to reconnect to those loved ones. Now, as we come to this part of the episode, this one's turning out to be a long one. I didn't expect this one to be so long, but I'm here for it. I love this conversation. We've talked a lot about what we can do around this specific time of year, but what can we do to align with these energies outside of Samhain, in our daily lives? And Samhain isn't just about one night of celebration. It's an energy that can influence how we live and really grow during this time of year. The core themes of Samhain: death, rebirth, transformation. It offers us a beautiful opportunity to embrace the cycles of life. And to align with these energies, we can start by creating more space for grounding practices. With the veil between worlds thinner, this can be a time of heightened sensitivity. So grounding ourselves is really essential to stay balanced. We want to be able to have that balance and understand what is outworldly and what is of this realm. And so being able to do that is really making sure that we've got some strong grounding practices in place. One simple way to ground is meditation, or take a few minutes each day to connect with nature. Take short walks outdoor, stand barefoot on the earth, or sit quietly among the trees. All of these moments can help us anchor our energy during the spiritual season. And if you're in an area where it's cold, you're saying, Melanie, but it's freezing outside. I can't imagine putting my feet on icy ground, if you have houseplants, sit among your houseplants. Put your hands in the soil, water them, talk to them, nurture them. Those are other ways that you can ground while it's freezing cold outside. Another powerful practice during this time is setting intentions. And that's kind of like the whole thing around this natural practice is the intention behind what you're doing. So as we transition from autumn into winter in the coming months, it's natural to reflect on the year that's passed and consider what we want to cultivate in the months ahead. Samhain marks the new year in many spiritual traditions, so it's the perfect time to set intentions for what you want to bring into your life. But unlike the resolutions that are, made at the calendar new year, these intentions can be more spiritual in nature. These are going to be focused more on personal growth, inner healing, that, as I said, the shadow work, the healing journey we have to go on, and that spiritual alignment. So take some time to sit with these intentions, perhaps lighting a candle or meditating as you reflect on them, allowing the energy of Samhain to guide you through setting meaningful goals for your journey. And as I said earlier, this is a great time to embrace shadow work. Shadow work is about facing the aspects of ourselves that we might normally avoid. Our fears, those insecurities, or past wounds that we have. And Samhain invites us to acknowledge these shadows, not in judgment, but with compassion. And as I said earlier, a simple way to do this is just begin through journaling. Asking yourself what lessons you need to learn from the past. And what parts of yourself are ready to be transformed. Remember, shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about understanding, accepting, and integrating all parts of who you are. And this type of reflection can bring profound healing, helping you to more align deeply with your true self, as you move into the darker months. When everything slows down outside, this is a time that we typically see the seasonal depression and maybe just a general depression disorder rearing back up. And oftentimes I found from someone who suffers from depression and anxiety that journaling when I have these fears and these negative thoughts really helps me to kind of process and let them go. So now let's talk about, I have to throw yoga in here somewhere, right? This is just something that I do. I have to find a way to throw yoga and meditation in these conversations. So let's talk about how we throw yoga and meditation into the mix. Yoga and or meditation. You don't have to do both. Whichever resonates with you most. Maybe neither resonate with you, and that's okay too. But if you are so curious or choose to explore yoga or meditation can support this alignment with the energies of death and rebirth. Both practices, they offer us a way to connect more deeply with the body, the mind, and the spirit during Samhain. That's the whole concept of yoga, is the union of the body, spirit, and mind. So through yoga, we can embody the cycles of release and renewal, moving through postures that that really let us let go of that stagnant energy and make space for new beginnings. So somatic yoga, really great for this. I also find, for me personally, vinyasa works really, really good to let go of that nervous or stagnant energy that my body often holds on to. You could try incorporating ground poses like mountain pose, tree pose, those kind of poses to like center yourself, or heart opening poses like camel pose. And this pose invites connection to spirit. Now, I would probably go ahead and say, for those of you that have experienced trauma, CPTSD, PTSD, camel pose may feel a little too vulnerable for you, so there are other poses that you can do. Upward facing dog is a very good heart opening pose. Reverse warrior, those can be used as heart opening poses in exchange for something like camel. But these poses are going to help connect to spirit. Meditation, especially during Samhain, can really help us connect with our intuition and deepen our understanding of the cycles of life. A meditation focused on the theme of release, like visualizing yourself letting go of what no longer serves you, really can be incredibly powerful during this time. I have found them incredibly powerful. Just that symbolization of letting go of things that weren't working for me has really done numbers for my mental health. So you might want to explore meditations that focus on connecting with your ancestors, your spirit guides, if that's something you're open to, really opening yourself to the wisdom that's here as the veil thins. And as you integrate these practices, really the key is to listen to your intuition. I mean, that's the whole thing in your yoga practice, your meditation, just everyday life. Listen to your intuition. Samhain is that time of quiet introspection and spiritual death. So allow yourself the space to slow down, reflect, tune into the energies around you. Whether it's through grounding, whether it's shadow work or yoga movement, maybe Pilates or some other exercise that works for you. Find what practice resonates most deeply with you, and then let it guide your journey through the season of death and rebirth. All right. So as we begin to close this episode, I want to take a few moments to share my reflections on Samhain. Every year this season brings up such a profound sense of introspection for me. I really get into my thoughts and my feels this time of year. And it's that time when I feel a deeper connection, not only to my ancestors, but to the cycles in my own life. There's something about Samhain's energy that just encourages me to slow down. Reflect on the months, years that have passed, depending on where I am in my thoughts, and kind of embrace the changes that are happening around and within me. Not trying to control them, just embracing them, allowing it to happen. And one of the things that I love the most about Samhain is really the opportunity for the quiet moments. My introverted self loves the quiet moments. And I find myself drawn to spending more time in nature, especially being here in the mountains. That's where you can really feel the shifts of the seasons. There's something incredibly grounding about watching the leaves change colors and the trees let go of their leaves, knowing that this is a natural part of Earth's cycle. It reminds me to also let go, some of my old habits, fears that are holding me back. the judgments that are no longer serving me. And as we touched on earlier, this is a time for me to practice more shadow work, gently confronting those parts of myself that still need that healing. This is a season that also feels like a beautiful opportunity for spiritual growth. In my personal practice, I've noticed how the thinning of the veil around Samhain allows for more meaningful connections with spirit, whether it's feeling that presence of someone who's passed, or just simply sensing that deeper wisdom that's flowing through. I find this time of year opens up space for those kinds of experiences. And as I mentioned earlier in the episode, there have been moments when I've felt guided or heard whispers from the other side, and those experiences reaffirm that, we're never truly alone, even when it feels like we are. I encourage each of you to take some time this Samhain season to explore your own relationship with death and rebirth. It's not always an easy thing to contemplate. Death in particular can bring up fears or discomfort, but Samhain gives us the gift of seeing death not only as an ending, but as a transformation, a transition into a new cycle. As we honor the dead, we also celebrate life and the possibility that rebirth brings. One way to honor this cycle in your own life is through those simple offerings. You don't need to create a grand altar or perform any elaborate rituals if you don't want to. Sometimes the simplest acts hold the most meaning. A small offering or food or drink left outside as a gesture of thanks to the earth or to your ancestors can be incredibly powerful. Or perhaps lighting a candle and offering a quiet prayer for those who have passed, acknowledging their presence and the love they left behind. Spending time in nature is another beautiful way to honor personal and collective ancestors. Nature itself holds the energy of life, death, and rebirth. And by immersing yourself in it, you can tap into the same rhythm. Consider taking a walk with the intention of honoring the earth, noticing how the natural world mirrors the cycles of your own life. For me, honoring my ancestors, it's not always a formal process. It's often in the small, quiet moments that I feel the deepest connection. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting outside under the stars and just silently acknowledging their presence, expressing gratitude for the love and wisdom that they've passed on. And other times it's through making my favorite dish that reminds me of someone who's crossed over, sharing that food within family in their honor. Filipino food is really a big comfort food in my household. My husband's Filipino and his mother passed away when he was 18. So I learned how to make these Filipino meals. His sister really helped me out with those recipes, and those are endearing meals at home. You should see everybody's face when they come in and they smell that adobo or sinigang or lumpia, frying. They go through the roof. They love it, So as you navigate this season, I invite you to explore what resonates with you. Maybe you feel called to create an altar, or maybe you just prefer to honor this time in a more personal, quiet way. However you choose to celebrate, remember that Samhain is a time of deep connection to ourselves, to our loved ones who have passed, and to the natural cycles that govern life and death. And in closing, I encourage you to embrace the energy of Samhain with an open heart. Reflect on what this time of year means for you personally. How can you honor your own cycles of death and rebirth? What lessons can you take from this season as we move toward the quieter, more introspective months of winter. I just want to thank you, beautiful souls, for joining me today as we explored the powerful energies of Samhain. I really hope that this episode has inspired you to connect with the sacredness of the season and to honor the transitions in your life with grace and intention. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of today's episode? How are you planning to celebrate Samhain or align with its energies in your own life? Leave a comment, share your thoughts. I always love to hear your insights and your experiences. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you never miss an episode. Along with discussions like this one, I also share yoga classes and guided meditations to support you on your journey. Hit that subscribe button and join our community as we continue exploring, growing, and evolving together. Thank you for being here, and until next time, take care of yourselves and continue walking your path with love and awareness. Namaste.